All right, hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Jeremy Langlois coming to you from Houmas House Estate and Gardens. And today we are celebrating seasonal ingredients, local ingredients, and really trying to just utilize some of these products that we just love here in Louisiana. And right now we're in the heart of Satsuma season. So some of these fall citruses, kumquats, Satsumas, they really come into their own at early November, end of October, and then they'll be with us all the way through December. In fact, this is just, I literally just ripped a branch right off of a tree right here at Houmas House. And I thought, since I love using these ingredients, why don't I incorporate that into a recipe today? So we're going to do a Satsuma and Creole mustard glazed pork chop. However, with everything that we do, and we know and we love that we have people from all over the globe watching this. And if you are watching it right now, man, do me a favor, hit that like or share button. It's right there. Just put your little finger and give it a little tap. We would love for you to share this out because we enjoy doing these so much and we just have so much fun. But for all those people who are maybe not within Louisiana and doesn't have access to these ingredients, we're going to talk about some very simple alternatives that you could use so anybody can do this recipe at home. So again, as I said, we're doing a Satsuma glazed pork chop. Well, first of all, before we even get started with any of the cooking, what's a Satsuma if you're not familiar with it? Well, Satsuma is just a type of citrus, very similar to an orange or a mandarin or it's something like that. But I guess one of the main differences and the things that I like about Satsumas is they're a little bit softer in texture than an orange. They really don't have many seeds in them, and they're so simple to peel and segment. So I can just take a Satsuma here, kind of quickly peel it just like this, and it really just makes this great fruit that, I mean, oftentimes here at Houmas House, just as a snack, I'll pop one of these right off of the tree, and this will become my stack for the day. I mean, look how easy that is. You can take it, they split into the little segments. Perfect. Love using them, and we're going to come back and use those. But of course, as we get into this recipe, you can very simply just substitute orange. Anytime we're using Satsuma, substitute orange, boom, you're off to the races and ready to go. But like I said, we're doing a Satsuma and Creole mustard glazed pork chop. So let's get the pork chop going first, and then we'll get the glaze going. So look what I got here. This is just beautiful. I got this is a really thick pork chop. However, I know that whether you go to a grocery store or a market, that pork chops come in all different thicknesses and sizes. I like a really thick pork chop, but of course this recipe can be used with any one. Thinner pork chops, we're just going to cook a little bit less. But the first thing I want to do is take this beautiful pork chop and get some seasoning on it. Now what I'm going to do for this, normally oftentimes you'll see me just come and put a little salt and pepper on it, and that's perfect. But this I like to really, anytime I'm cooking a piece of meat like this, I like to have a little rub. So I'm going to make a very simple rub. This is what I got going on. I got some kosher salt, some black pepper, and some cayenne pepper. You always want to be careful with cayenne pepper because it could be a little spicy. If you're not sure how much to use for this to make this quick little seasoning mix, make sure you check out our recipe. It'll be on Facebook shortly, and it's always on our Houmas House website. Click the resources tab, boom, you'll run into the recipes. Just going to kind of quickly mix this up, just give it a little shake, and then depending on how thick your pork chop is, or anytime you're seasoning meat, obviously this should go without saying, but the thicker a cut of meat is, the more seasoning you want to put on it. So this pork chop is pretty thick, so I really kind of go real generously with the seasoning here. I'll always love sprinkling on a plate, and then I like to say just mop it up. I'm going to take, and even there, I kind of take the meat and move it around and really make sure I'm coating all sides with this and just got a nice seasoning on that pork chop. I got a skillet here. It's on high heat. We're going to get some olive oil in the pan, and we're just going to start searing this pork chop. Get that going right in there. Anytime we put anything in a skillet, we always want to hear that sizzle. That's important. It lets us know we're cooking. It helps whether you're cooking fish, whether you're cooking vegetables, whether you're cooking meat. If you don't have that sizzle, oftentimes if you ever have trouble with things sticking to your pan, it's because it needs to get a quick sear or it'll just kind of bake into the pan. So if you put something in a skillet and you don't hear that sizzle, then that means your pan wasn't hot enough, and you always want to just crank up the heat on there. Don't be scared of cooking on high heat. As this starts to sear, we're going to start preparing our glaze. Watch how simple this is. Again, I took these are Satsumas right off of the tree from Houmas House. I just went, split them. Look how beautiful that is, by the way, whenever we split these. I got a little juicer here. You can squeeze them, but man, I love using this juicer. These really don't have seeds in them, but whether you're juicing lemons, look, it just makes it so easy. I'm gonna start squeezing some of these Satsumas to get some of that juice. Let's do one more. Looking to get about a cup of juice. All right, let me move this over here so we can see it. I'm gonna come back to my pork chop. I see I'm getting some great color on it. Exactly what we want. Look how beautiful that is. I'm gonna flip that bad boy over and let it keep doing its thing. Now, into the same bowl, actually had a little bit more Satsuma juice, just added to it. We'll add that there. Then we're just gonna add a couple ingredients, real simple. First, I have some honey. Now, I don't know if y'all know this at home, but do you know that we actually have beehives here at Houmas House, and a couple times a year we're able to go in and get some of that honey. We actually sell some of that honey in our gift shop, but it's so great just to have. One of the things I just love about working here as a chef is I have an herb garden and vegetable garden, and we try to grow, especially during the summertime when things grow really great, whether it's tomatoes or herbs, we're always looking for something that we can grow, and we just love it. And having things like honey, dream come true for a chef, just to have access to these ingredients. So I got my juice, I got my honey in there. This is a little apple cider vinegar. Really use any vinegar you like, but just gonna add a little bit of acidity. We have some very sweet things here. Look to get a little acid in there. And then for a little bit of body, which is gonna kind of bring all this together, I'm adding a couple spoonfuls of, this is whole grain Creole mustard. Now, Creole mustard is a whole grain mustard you find often in Louisiana. But if you don't have access to Creole mustard, you can very easily, the best substitute is whole grain Dijon mustard. However, regular Dijon mustard is what I would use if I didn't have access to that whole grain Creole mustard. Dijon mustard will work just fine. Now, we're at a point now where I have really great, look how beautiful this looks. I have a really great sear on both sides of this pork chop. What I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna take this out just for a second. I'm gonna set it on a little side plate. It's gonna go back in, but I wanna go right back into this skillet. The reason we wanna go right back into this skillet is because we already have some great flavor on here, and we can do this all in the same pan. I'm going in with a little bit of onions, and I'm just gonna kind of start to, man, look, cooking on high, and that's good. Start to get these sauteing right away. When your pan's hot like this, it cooks really quick. And then one great thing, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but when I was searing that pork chop, we had a lot of great kind of caramelization and brownness on the bottom of the pan. Well, just adding something like, oftentimes you'll hear the term deglazed pan, which just means to lift up a lot of that flavor, which is kind of gathered on your pan. You don't always have to add just a liquid to it. Just by adding something like onions, well, what are onions? Onions are mostly water. So whenever I add my chopped onions in it, you see I get a lot of steam come off the pan. Well, that's the liquid. And then just by adding these onions, I never even had to scrape with a spoon or anything like that. It started to naturally deglaze the pan. So a little bit of red onions in there. You can use shallots. And now I'm going to go in with this glaze mixture that we made earlier. Again, that was the Satsuma juice, a little bit of honey, a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and a little bit of that Creole mustard. Once we got that in, I have some beautiful fresh sprigs of thyme. And what I can do here is I can pull some off, but whenever I have something like this, I'm just gonna, because I'm gonna pull them out anyway, almost like using a bay leaf, I'm just gonna throw those herbs right into the pan. And that's just gonna kind of perfume that flavor with that beautiful herbs. Then I'm gonna go back with my pork chop and I'm gonna put this back in. Now this is where, depending on how thick your pork chop is how long you need to cook this. If I was doing this at home and I went to the grocery store, oftentimes me and my wife at home will oftentimes buy just these, regular pork chops, and we love those because we can literally cook them 2 or 3 minutes on each side. They're done and it's great, and we love cooking pork chops like that. But whenever obviously we have a thick pork chop like this, well, it's going to take a little bit longer. So if you have a thin pork chop, you can actually come back into the pan right here, let it cook just for a few minutes on each side, and kind of coat it around in this glaze, and they'll be ready. However, because this pork chop is very thick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an oven set to 350 degrees. And I'm going to take this pan and I'm going to go right into the oven and I'm going to pop it into the oven. So imagine we just pop that right into the oven. Get this out of the way. Now what we're looking to do, if you have a meat thermometer, we're just looking to cook it. Again, it's going to completely depend on how thick your pork chop is. This is probably going to take about 10 to 15 minutes in a 350 degree oven to cook all the way through. If you were to take a thermometer and get an internal temperature, you're looking to get an internal temperature of 145 degrees for pork. You can actually go a little bit lower than that, but most people kind of like their pork cooked to that state. So 145 degrees is what we're looking for. But after you've gotten to that point, this is what you'll have. Oh, one pro tip as well. I love cooking with a skillet and then transferring right to the oven. However, I've mentioned this before, but there's a couple things you want to know anytime you're cooking like that. If you're using something like cast iron, it's great. You throw it right in the oven. A skillet is great. You need to look out for two things though. Oftentimes skillets will have either a rubber or wooden handle. And you can see here, both the skillets we use, they don't have a rubber or wooden handle. If you were to put that in the oven, the rubber might melt or the wood might burn. So make sure you're using a skillet without a rubber or wooden handle. If you don't have access to that, well, you can just put the pork chop and the pan into a baking dish that can hold some liquid and then just transfer that right into the oven. But this saves you with your dishes at the end. Once we get to the point where this now is what here is what will look like when it comes out of the oven after it's cooked for about 15 minutes to 20 minutes, and you'll see the glaze is starting to thicken up a little bit. It's gotten really nice and dark. You've gotten some good caramelization. So what you would do is you would take that skillet right out of the oven, and I want you to bring it back to the stove top. If you've noticed your glaze has gotten a little thin and you still have access to a little more juice, you could put a little more juice in it. Mine still looks good here. And if it's too thin, well, what we're going to do is we're going to take that pork chop that's cooked now, we're just going to put it on a side plate just for a moment, and we're going to bring this liquid and this glaze up to a boil to finish it. And what we're going to do is we're going to reduce it to it looks a little bit syrupy. However, it's going to probably have gotten pretty syrupy just cooking in the oven itself. And then what we want to do is we want to have it just come up to a boil and have it just start to bubble on top. And then what I'm going to do when I see it bubbling, I'm actually going to watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to kill my heat. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to swirl in a couple pats of butter. Here I got some, this is from shout out to my favorite dairy company in Louisiana, Feliciana's Best. We buy their products at the farmer's market all the time. Their chocolate milk is the bomb. But we're using some butter right here. And this is softened butter. But however, you could use butter right out of the refrigerator as well, but softened, melts in a little easy. But what you want to do is just lightly, I'm going to put a little dab in, and then I'm just going to take the skillet and just kind of hold it and just start to whisk in or stir in that butter. Now, why did I turn the heat off? The reason I turned the heat off is because if I were to have left this on the stovetop with the heat on, we're making kind of an emulsion of this butter. And what that means is we're just kind of trying to suspend it. I'm taking 2 scoops of butter and we're just going to kind of put it in there. If it gets too hot, it'll break, meaning the butter itself will kind of melt all the way in this liquid and then separate. And then what happens is it'll separate, so it won't be emulsified, meaning you'll have a layer of, it won't be a complete sauce that's held all together. You'll have a layer of butter and fat on the top, and then you'll have the glaze underneath it, and it'll be 2 separate things. But if we're just real gentle with it, we can kind of just get it all together. Once we're to that point, we're pretty much done. Now, this isn't on the recipe, but one thing you can do just almost as a garnish or a way to finish it is here's some of those Satsuma segments that I'm going to just put right in at the very end and just kind of let the heat from the pan kind of warm this up. That's going to make a great topping or garnish that's going to perfectly complement this pork chop. Just kind of give that a quick little stir. The reason I'm adding it at the last second is I just want to warm them up because I want to keep that beautiful texture. If they were to have cooked a little bit, these would have broken down very easily. Now to serve this, I'm going to put the pork chop right onto the center of the plate. Get that bad boy on there. I happen to have, serve this however you like, mashed potatoes, anything like that, a little starch, a little vegetables. I just happen to have a little confetti of, this is just a little bit of sauteed squash, some little baby tomatoes, which I love, and some sauteed zucchini. I just love cooking this little vegetable medley because it just has a lot of great color that looks really nice. And I'm going to get that on there. And then I'm going to finish it by really being generous with this glaze, this kind of sweet and sour glaze of the vinegar and that Satsuma juice, but also it has that nice body from the mustard that we added to it. It's really going to complement this pork chop perfectly. All right, let's get that all up on there. And there it is, y'all. A couple things as we finish up. We'll be serving this in our Carriage House restaurant at Houmas House this Friday and Saturday. We would love to see y'all. Be on the lookout. We will be announcing our Thanksgiving plans for Houmas House very shortly, which we'll have posted all over our Facebook page. Would love to have you out. We're going through all the social distancing guidelines to really have a great day. Love to have you there. Information will be available shortly. Other than that, thank you all so much for tuning in. Hit share if you haven't already. I'm counting on you. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, guys.